government is never only about doing the easy things. If governing was so easy, there would be many spectacularly successful governments in the world. But there aren't. In government, it means we have to make hard choices. How to pay for a good program, like affordable health care for our growing population of aging people. Which underused services can we trim back, like certain bus routes, so we can spend or subsidize more in other, more urgent areas? Which group among us can carry a little bit more of the burden to relieve the load on others who are in greater need? Each time you have to weigh, you have to choose. Sometimes we have to say no or not yet, even to reasonable requests, because resources are limited. It is the government's duty to make these hard choices sensibly, but also sensitively. And a responsible opposition should be held accountable also for what it proposes and what it opposes. Their sums must also add up. And when they do not add up, which quite often happens, then is our job to point this out and to produce a little calculator. Sometimes the opposition is missing in action. When spiky issues comes up, like the repeal of Section 377A, this happens. For the government, when a spiky issue comes up, you can't disappear. You've got to assess the problem, weigh the arguments, and work out what, in our best judgment, is the right way forward for Singapore. There are strongly held opposing views among different segments of the population, and we have to do our best to bring everyone along and to hold everyone together and keep the society together. So on 377A, our ministers, Comrades Masagos and Shanmugam, Edwin Tong, Desmond Lee, and many more, they've spent weeks and months meeting the contending groups, all with very strong, passionately held views, explaining, listening, taking in, giving time, bringing people gradually to accept what we ought to do together. They listened carefully, they explained patiently, they got all sides to accept that on such an issue, everybody has to give and take. No group can get everything at once. Now, where is the opposition on Section 377A? Are they critiquing the government's approach? Do they support or oppose what the government is doing? Are they offering alternative proposals? None of the above. The opposition is missing in action. They've said nothing so far. They've declined all comment. They refuse even to say whether they have a party position or if they lift their whip on MPs when Parliament votes on the amendments, which it's going to do at the end of this month. Because why? They don't want to displease anyone, therefore they have gone AWOL. AWOL. You can't have an AWOL governing Singapore. Governing Singapore is a serious business, and so is being the opposition, especially if it aims to win more and more seats, which must eventually mean taking over. You can't lie low and disappear when it suits you, and when the opposition does that, it calls into question their fitness for Parliament, let alone to govern. But even that is not the biggest sin. Of biggest concern are those politicians and parties who stir up resentment in order to gain political advantage. They tear relentlessly at fault lines. Residents versus foreigners, citizens versus PRs, even old citizens versus new. Sometimes they veer into racist territory. They talk about a certain trade agreement, but actually they're talking about a certain race. Question after question, speech after speech. They are not trying to obtain any information or to solve any problem. In fact, they are not interested in solutions. They are deliberately working up passions, exacerbating tensions, in order to create disaffection, divide society. Why? To win votes. Singaporeans are not naive, but neither are we immune to rhetoric that manipulates our emotions, especially when times are tough and people are anxious and under pressure. And such irresponsible actions by the opposition do nothing to improve our lives. And we've seen what happens elsewhere when divisive politics hold sway and unscrupulous politicians gain support, sometimes get into government. And we've got to get Singaporeans to recognize such rabble-rousing for what it's worth and repudiate it. Stand with the PAP, prevent divisive politics from taking hold here. The PAP will never give way to such divisive politics. We will never hesitate to fight rabble-rousers and charlatans. We will never compromise on the values which are embedded in the pledge.